Morticia. Any cousin is? No. Close. On behalf of the Youngstown chapter of the American Guild of Organists, I'd like to welcome you all to our second annual Halloween organ event. This started, I think we were the first in the country 48 years ago at the First Unitarian Church on Elm Street with the Youngstown chapter of the American Guild. And we had our first Halloween program. So I'm glad to see this tradition continue. In true church fashion, this is not a church service, where it's kind of, although it's pat on everyone. There's 3 pumpkin carols, so please stand and sing as well as you can. They're familiar Christmas tunes with different texts. On the 12 days of Halloween, you can add screeches and howls and anything that the Spirit makes you. piece is C sharp minor, which seems to be a key for scary music.
minute, Lurch. I'm missing a prop. These churches are so dark, it's hard to see. I told Gomez I needed better lighting because Uncle Fester has to wear glasses now. So he brought me this. There's only one problem. I can't talk and do this. So anyway, here's something I hope you'll really like. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease sharpened my senses, not destroyed nor dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. With what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye was always closed, so it was impossible for me to do the work. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name and in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. To think there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. His room was as black as pitch, with thick darkness, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing on it steadily and steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in dread, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not the groan of pain or grief. Oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since that first slight noise. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crawling upon the floor." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he found it all in vain. When I had waited a very long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it until at length a single dim ray, like a thread of a spider, shot from out the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow of my bones. And now there came into my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me into uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once, only once, and in an instant I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. But for many minutes the heartbeat went on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there. Many minutes, there was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and just deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. When When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. There entered 3 men who introduced themselves as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by the neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in bed. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself growing pale, and I wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied ringing in my ears. But they sat and still chatted. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a very high key, with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder and louder, and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no! No! They heard! They knew! They were making a mockery of my horror! But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more! I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart!
So how many of you remember the Addams Family TV show? Or, oh wow, those were reruns? I have a theory that it fostered a whole generation of not only harpsichord players, but harpsichord builders, myself included. It was just fascinating to see this big guy play this delicate instrument. I thought it was really fascinating. Anyhow, based on that, I wrote 13 short, spooky variations. I think I forgot my music. He's getting the music. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
some audience participation. follow Miss Mary Ann.
Come along. And you may speak French anytime you wish. And you, Boucher. Let us get up, darling. Get up, get up. Music, music.
Thank you, Mary Ann, or Morticia. Could we rehearse some screeches and howls? I don't know why that stuff isn't in the hymnals. So please stand and we'll sing the 12 Days of Halloween, and hopefully I won't get lost in all these verses. But please add screeches and howls.
coming on behalf of the Youngstown chapter of the American Guild of Organists and my friends, and also the good folks here at Trinity United Methodist Church for allowing us to have this program on their magnificent pipe organ. So thank you very much. Please join us in the lobby for some refreshments. Thank you very much.